right, so we're also broadcasting Facebook Live. There's a handful of people that aren't coming in, so they can't see anything. They can just hear me briefing, basically. So, also wanted to hand out this TSP sheet before we jump too much into this. This is just a sheet I do every month, and it's just the return for the month, and it has a So my name's Mike Brown. I'm one of the financial counselors here at the ANFRC. So TSP is going to be our focus today. We also offer a first class, and we do that once a quarter. So the way it works is we did the first class last month. This month we're doing the TSP. Then we won't do anything in May as far as the first and TSP class goes. But each one of them is roughly about an hour long. I would highly encourage you to come to the first class if you ever plan to retire. Just a lot of information, some things to think about before you actually get ready to retire. Again, today our focus is going to be primarily TSP. So if I ask y'all, do you know what fund you're invested in TSP? Do y'all know what fund you're in? You can just leave that back there and I'll just grab it whenever we get done. Y'all know what fund you're invested in TSP? Or have you ever went out and looked at it? Get a lot of folks, both military and civilians, that have absolutely no idea where their investment's at. So if you fall into that category, I would encourage you to come and sit down with either myself or Jody. There's actually about 5 or 6 of us that are certified here at the center. When it comes to TSP, this is kind of my baby. This is one I really spend a lot of time on. So, and some other ones, they may join us here later. I'm not sure. But if you don't know where your money's invested at or where it's being put at, I'd encourage you to come and sit down, and we probably need to have a more in-depth talk on this. So when we're talking TSP, it is one part of what we call our, get my slides going here. It's one part of what we call the financial stool. So you got your pension. If you retire from civil service, you're going to have Social Security to some extent. We don't know what it's going to look like when we get there, but we are paying into it, so we should be getting something out of it. And then whatever we invest into the thrift savings plan. And of course, there's thousands of other opportunities where we can invest our money at. But again, for us in the military or civil service, and when we talk TSP, everything that we talk about here today, it's identical for both civilian and military. It's absolutely identical. So the benefit we have, that's the pension part. If we do X amount of years, then we're going to retire. We're going to get a pension for the rest of our life. So that's the benefit part. Then we have the defined contribution part. That's where we put something into our account and the federal government puts something in there as well. And again, that's that defined contribution piece. So TSP is a government retirement system. However, it is not managed by the federal government. It is actually managed by BlackRock, which is the largest asset manager in the world. So that's a good thing. So it is a government retirement system, but it's managed by an actual private entity. In fact, this coming month, I want to say around the 15th of this month, there's actually another company that's going to be co-managing TSP. BlackRock will still be part of it, but there's actually another company that's going to co-manage it. Why it needs to be co-managed, I really don't know, but that's what TSP has decided to do. So typically when we're talking about investing, diversification is something that you're going to hear often. And there is a good argument to be made both with a lot of diversification or a little diversification when it comes to investments. Warren Buffett is someone that I watch a lot of his stuff, and listen to what he has to say about money. I mean, he's a extremely wealthy guy that started basically with nothing. And one of his concepts is if you have really good companies that you're putting your investment in, you don't necessarily have to be diversified into, several hundred different companies or 500 or whatever the case is. And there's certainly an argument to be made for that. But typically, when we're talking about investing, we're talking about diversification, we're talking about spreading your money out. So if one fund or one company fails, your entire investment doesn't fail. So from that aspect, diversification is a good thing. And all that means, a simple way of putting it is, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Don't invest in just oil or just silver or just gold or just Microsoft or whatever you want to put in front of it. The idea is invest in several companies, so if one fails, your entire investment doesn't fail. So for us, civil service, if we're putting at least 5% into our retirement account, we're going to get a full total of 5% going into our account. The way that works is we get 1% automatic. Even if we put nothing in, we're still going to get 1% going to our TSP account. If we're doing at least 5%, then we're going to have an additional 4% added. So really the way that works, it's dollar for dollar for the first 3% and 50 cents on the dollar for the remaining 2%. But for easy numbers, you put 5 in, you're going to get 5 in return. But the 1% of that 5 is automatic. We get it regardless. So that's why that's kind of confusing to people. And I normally just say, put at least 5 in, you're going to get at least 5 in return. But here's kind of the way it breaks out again. Even if we put 0% in, we're still going to get a 1% automatic contribution going to our TSP account. And that's both military and civilian. Again, when we're talking TSP or the blended retirement or FERS retirement, it's all the same. It's all now under the exact same umbrella. So if we had military people here that were in the blended, it would be exactly the same for them. There is no difference between a FERS retirement and a blended retirement system for military now.
So isn't that kind of low, that 1% compared to other 401ks?
Well, no, not really, because in all honesty, if you're doing 5, you're going to get 5 in return. So if you're just looking at the 1%, I'm not going to put anything in my retirement. You're still getting something.
Oh, okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes,
Okay. Yeah, so now there are other companies where you can get a better than 5%. And I always tell everybody, whether they're civil service or working downtown, whatever free money they're going to give you, then by all means do that at a minimum, because that's 100% return on your investment. It's kind of how I look at it. If somebody's going to give me $10, if I put $10 in something, then I'm all over that. I love free money. I mean, who don't? So, but again, this is just a breakdown. If you ever wondered, well, what if I'm only doing 3%? If you're only doing 3, then you're going to actually have a total of 7 going to your account, because the 1% is automatic, but then 1% has an additional 1 that goes in there. That's the 1-for-1 that goes into there. Then the 2%, you hit the 3%, and then from there, it's 50 cents on the dollar. And by the way, this is Jody. He's one of the other guys I was talking about. If you don't know, if you want to come in and do a one-on-one, get with either Jody or myself, and we'll be glad to go through this much more in depth. We can go specifically into your account. We do that all the time with both military and civilians. So, but this is just a breakdown on our matching. This looks at 2 different investors. We have Peter and we have Paul. We get asked often, especially these young airmen that come into the military, they're like, well, what's the real difference between 3 to 5%? That's not much. It's only 2%. Does it really matter? So this example is a prime example. It looks at two different investors, Peter and Paul. They have a 20-year career. During that 20-year career, Peter puts 3%, Paul puts in 5%. Again, 2% difference between those two. Then, assuming that they do 20 years of service, they retire, they get out, they separate. Annual salary, $39,000. Expected annual salary increase, 5%. Somebody raise their hand in civil service if we've gotten a 5% pay raise lately, because I ain't seen it. I ain't seen it. So anyway, that's what's assumed here. And then a annual return of 7%. To me, that's pretty conservative. Certainly hope my investments do better than 7%. After 20 years of service, Peter's invested about $90,000. Paul's invested almost $129,000. Difference of about $38,000 roughly. Then we look at the earnings over that same 20-year period. You can see the numbers here, and we'll add these two columns here together. So Peter has a total of $171,000 versus Paul that has $245,000. Again, that 2% makes a big difference. Then we're going to look 10 years after separation. This top line here is just from the bottom of the last page. And as you see, we're looking at a 3%, 5%, and a 7% annual growth. At a 7%, again, I think that's conservative. 10 years after service, there's $143,000 difference with that 2%. That 2% makes a big difference. And you may think, well, but they wouldn't have that much in their account. But if we're looking at a service member that retired after 20 years, they may have another 20 to 30 years before they even start accessing this money. So this scenario that we just showed you is extremely possible, whether you're military or civilian. Even if you're a civilian, you might retire at age 60, 65, whatever that age happens to be. You may still not need to get into this money. Then when we're talking about TSP, it's a retirement type account, but you don't have to necessarily get into it when you first retire. It's totally up to you. I mean, it's your account, and you can't get money out of this account until you're 59 and a half years old or older. If you take money out prior, if you take a distribution, you're going to get hit pretty heavily from Uncle Sugar. You're going to lose about 10% right off the top for early withdrawal penalty. If it's traditional money, you still owe Uncle Sugar 20% of that because it hadn't been taxed yet. So a third of that you're losing right off the top. If it's a traditional investment, you're taking withdrawal and you're not 59 and a half years or older. If it's a Roth, you get hit with that 10% early withdrawal penalty. Then you have to pay taxes on any earnings that you've earned during that time span on that money as well. And then you get whatever that number happens to be that you pulled out. We might go out to this website. Let me jump on into here. So we have 5 core funds within TSP. We have the GFCS and the I fund. Those are our 5 core funds. And then we have the Lifecycle funds. There's actually 10 Lifecycle funds now. July of last year, July 15th, roughly last year, TSP added 5 new Lifecycle funds. And we'll talk about those and look at those in just a second. So our 5 core funds, the GFCS and the I. G fund basically has no risk of losing money. Who would want to invest in a G type fund? I mean, what age group of people would be looking at something that has no risk? Someone fixing to retire, right? Or already in retirement possibly. That's where you'd want a large portion of your investment at, because there's no risk of losing it at that point. And there's over 200 different funds within this. So we talked about diversification. Every fund within TSP is diversified. It's not just in one item. So again, no risk in the G fund. The F fund is the bond market. There's over 10,000 different bonds and notes within this one fund here. Again, diversification. And also up the top here, it has a commercial equivalent on the outside. So when we're talking the S&P 500, if you hear the S&P 500 is up or down, you know that the C fund is up or down. If you hear that the Dow is up or down, you know that the S fund is up or down. So F fund again is the bond market. The C fund mirrors the S&P 500. We're talking the 500 largest U.S.-based companies: Google, Amazon, Microsoft, and there's a whole bunch of them. And I'll show you a screen here coming up. It's got a bunch on here. The C fund represents 87% of the U.S. market, and the remainder 13% is represented in the S fund. So the C fund is large U.S. mega companies. Some of these companies are over 175 years old now. They've been around. These are the big mega companies. Then you have the S fund. This is small to mid-size U.S.-based companies. That's one thing to keep in mind with both the C and the S. It's all U.S.-based companies. Nothing's overseas. In the S fund, we're talking over 3,300 different small to mid-sized U.S.-based companies. Then we have the I fund. I fund has the most risk out of all 15 funds. So G fund has no risk, the I fund has the most risk, and then you have stuff in between there. There's 914 companies that are part of this I fund. It's in 20 developed countries around the world. 900-something different companies. And we'll kind of look at these as we go through them. Again, this does have the most risk. And don't assume that if it has the most risk, it's going to have the most reward. That does not hold water, especially in a TSP fund. With most any investment, just because it has a higher risk doesn't mean you're going to necessarily get the highest reward. And I'll explain that as we get closer. We talked about the G fund, the F fund, C fund. So here's just kind of a snapshot, and some of those are repeated. I just put this slide together showing why I personally, and here's one of the disclaimers, I'm a financial counselor, not a financial advisor. Same thing with Jody and all the other people here. We are counselors, so we're not going to tell you you need to put your money in this fund or that fund. We're here to talk about it, educate, and you get to make that decision for yourself. I, however, love this particular fund, and the reason I like it is I shop at Walmart. I got a Chevy truck. I like Heinz ketchup. I like Coke. I have an HP computer. Verizon's my cell phone carrier. You get the picture. These are companies that I use all the time. These are companies that make up the largest 500 companies in the U.S. Pfizer, kind of a pretty popular name right now. These are, again, big U.S. mega companies. That's why I like this investment. And also, if you watch much information or videos or whatever by Warren Buffett, he's going to be talking about an S&P type investment. He thinks just for the average person that's not going to dig into the weeds on investing, he pushes the S&P 500 quite a bit. In fact, his company, I don't know if it's on here or not, but it is in the S&P 500, but I don't see it on there. But his is Berkshire Hathaway is his, and I don't see it on there. Not real important. Then we have the S fund. Again, this is small to mid-size U.S.-based companies. And I just threw some up there. More common ones: T-Mobile, Dish Network, Hilton, Dell Computer, Square. If you go to the mall and buy anything from a vendor, they're normally got a Square hooked up to either their iPad or their phone or something, and they slide or plug your card in. That's the Square, if you're not familiar with that. And again, there's 3,300 companies, so I couldn't put them all on here. I just put the more common ones that we're used to. iFund, again, overseas. These are the more popular ones. Nestle always seems to catch a lot of people off guard. They're overseas. I thought they were here stateside. So that's a overseas company. I believe a British, if I'm not mistaken, but don't hold me to that. Louis Vuitton, Toyota, BP. We have BP gas stations here in Texas, as well as Total. Again, 914 different companies when we're looking at that iFund. Then we have the Lifecycle funds. So the Lifecycle funds, you have an L income through an L2065. And these dates here are nothing more than just targeted retirement dates. That's all they are. Doesn't mean you have to retire then. They're just a targeted fund. And the way these work, every quarter, these funds are automatically adjusted. Every quarter. Doesn't matter whether the market's up or down. It's just on a timer, basically. Think of it like a clock. This one here, or think of it like a cook timer. This one's done. This would be someone retired, L income. Most of their investment is in that G fund that we talked about, secured. So they're not going to be losing their nest egg. Most of it's secured in that G and the F fund. CS and the I, that's where you have some risk. That's what's going to build wealth or make you money over time. If your money's just sitting here, your money ain't doing flip for you. You got to have some risk associated with it. And again, the key thing to remember when we're talking about long-term investing is when I plan to access the money, not necessarily retire, because I had TSP when I retired from the Air Force. However, I ain't retired. I just retired from the Air Force. I still have another 12 years civil service before I plan to actually retire. So be careful when you hear people say, well, you got to move your money to something more secure when you hit retirement because you don't want to lose your money. And I pick on Jody often because Jody has retired from this office literally, and he's now back as a contractor. But Jody, if you want to just share that, you retired and you kind of did the same thing for years that we heard people talk about.
Yeah, that was exactly it. I retired, so I therefore moved my money that I had at TSP over into the L income fund. And then I realized, you know what? I'm 60 years old, 60 and a half, and I'm not going to touch that money for who knows how long. And now I'm 65 and I still haven't touched it, and I probably won't touch it so I've adjusted mine and moved it out to where it has more risk. But again, a hedge against that inflation, because if I still had it in the L income, 3/4 of my money is going to be earning 0.97% interest or rate of return. And so I assume some more risk because I know I'm not going to touch my money. I don't have to touch it until I'm 72. So I've got 7 more years. I have a 7-year window before I'm actually going to start taking distributions.
Yeah. And to me, that's a prime example. Again, I briefed for a long time that when you hit retirement, you got to move that money to something more secure. If you're not using that money, if you're not relied upon that money also. So I'm not relied upon TSP when I retire. But some people are relied on it. I mean, that is like, this has got to be in place when I retire, otherwise I can't make my bills. If that's your situation, then it might look different to someone such as Jody that, hey, I still have another 7-year time horizon before I even need to dip in that money, or before I plan to dip in the money. Yes, sir?
Another question on these L funds.
Uh-huh.
I was here when this all kind of started with TSP, and the advice then, and that I continue to hear, as far as the L fund portion,
Yes.
is to invest, like for myself, if I'm going to retire in another 10 years-ish, then I would use the L 2030 fund.
Sure. Potentially, yes, sir. That would make, what you're saying.
But why? Why wouldn't I use the L 2045? If it's potentially going to make more.
Well, it's real easy. It comes down to risk tolerance. Can you withstand the pressure of knowing, I mean, I can, but can you? That's where it becomes personal for all of us. Can I stand this amount of risk? Because let's face it, the green, the light blue, and the purple, there's your risk. That's where your biggest risk is at in these different life cycle funds. Versus the 2030, it has a lot less of the risk in it.
Right, which I get that, but I guess what I'm kind of saying was the advice was for that portion of my investing to put it in the L 2030. Why wouldn't I diversify that and put it in some of the 2030, some of the 2040, some of the 20? Can you do that?
Oh, you can, absolutely. Here's the deal: whatever dollar amount you have in your account, it's 100% whatever the dollar amount is.
Right.
You can put that 100% any combination across these 16 that you or 15 that you'd like. I would not put it in multiple life cycle funds because then you're diversifying a diversified investment. I guess my train of thought is if I were going to do that, I could see putting maybe some into one of these life cycle funds. By the way, I don't use any of the life cycle funds, and I'll explain that in a minute. And then I'd put maybe a portion in the individual funds. That would be my thinking. Because when you're putting it in multiple already diversified investments, to me it just, from a financial standpoint, you're diluting your money-making capability. You're diluting it more when you do it through multiple diversified investments. If I were going to do that, maybe I would do a portion in one of the life cycle and then some in the individual funds. But again, I don't put any in the life cycle funds personally, and I'll explain that as we kind of go through this.
Mike,
Yes.
kind of what you're talking about is that buckets of money strategy, where you have, like you said, the 30 and the 35 and the 40, and so you've got more risk inherent in those other ones that are farther out, but you still have that one bucket of money that's in that more conservative.
Right.
I see that. The only downside of it, because I've thought about doing that bucket strategy myself. The only downside is TSP doesn't allow me to say, when I want to start taking money out, only send me money from my 2025 bucket. You know, if I get $1,000 a month out of my account, they're going to proportionally take.
Well, right, but by the time you start taking the money out, like you said, you're probably going to go back to a more conservative posture anyway in your overall. You may not, but I mean, in theory, as you get closer to that retirement, closer to taking the funds out,
Yeah.
you're going to assume a more conservative posture anyway with how you're.
Well, with the true bucket strategy though, you're not, because you've got the money in that one conservative bucket that you're going to be using over the next year or 2 or 3 years. The rest of it, you want it to have more risk in it because that's where the potential reward's at, and you want it to continue growing. So you're not going to, under a bucket strategy, you wouldn't move all your stuff into the conservative when you want to start taking money out. You would leave some of it that you're not going to use out.
Right, but you would pull it back from the further outs, is my point.
Yes, and you could.
Okay.
You certainly could, yeah. Yeah.
Like I said, when I started, it was you put your money in one L fund. I mean, that was just kind of direction. It wasn't. It was you pick the one that's nearest your retirement, and that's the one you use.
And I'll be honest, that is a good strategy if you're not going to sit down in class like you're doing now and get a better understanding of the way it works. That, in fact, that is exactly what TSP does now with all new federal employees and all civil service employees. They put them in age-appropriate life cycle funds, expected year when they're looking at possibly retiring. But it really comes down to a risk tolerance. You know, how much can you take? You know, yes, sir.
So I'm retired out of the military, and I didn't do TSP in the military. And I just started working civil service, and I think I'm in the L20 or L2045.
Yeah, based on your age.
L2040 or the 45. I'm in one of those two. I can't remember what my paperwork says, but I just got my TSP set up this past week.
Yeah.
And I know they automatically stick everything into one of those two.
Yes, sir. Age appropriate. Yep. So if I was joining right now and I'm 51, I would be in probably the L2065, which is on the next screen here. I'd be way out. Is where they? Well, no, I'm sorry. I would be way back. What am I thinking?
Yeah.
I'd be over here somewhere.
If you were 21.
Sorry, I did
Instead
that.
of 51.
I did that kind of backwards there. So it's totally age driven. So most of the new airmen we see, you know, they're 18, 19 years old. So that's what their investment looks like. A percent in the G and F, the rest in the CS and the I fund. So here's my life cycle bit is I don't like the I fund. I want to invest my money in that at this point. And it's simply a personal thing. Like I said, we all have different risk tolerances. We all have different reasons why I invest here or why I invest there. I don't like the life cycle fund because it does not have the return that I want to see on an investment, not long term. Sure, if you look at the sheet here, and let's take a quick look at the sheet. So in February, it had a 2.26% return for the last 12 months. And again, I'm looking at the I fund, 21.91% return. Pretty doggone good. I mean, that's not bad. Then if you look to the left, the S fund, which is rocking it, 56% return over the last 12 months. Versus somebody that never looked at this and all their money sitting in the G fund, they earned a 0.82% for the last 12 months. And I'm telling you, Jody and I both have experienced sitting on the other side of our desk, someone fixing to retire, whether it's military or civil services. Yeah, I've been plugging away, put money in there for years. Well, what do you mean? Oh, I don't know. I just put money into it. And it's so sad thinking that someone has spent 20 or 30 years working for the federal government, whether it's military or civilian, and it's been earning about 2.25% versus 10, 11, 12% potential. That's sad from a financial counselor standpoint, I'm here to tell you, because I see the, you got the whole half empty, half filled glass or whatever. I look at risk as a good thing. But some people don't. I mean, I have brief people and they're like, I absolutely will stay in the G fund. I cannot sleep at night knowing that I potentially could lose money. But it's an investment, so the chance is there. I always tell people you're not going to lose any shares unless you sell your investment, and we'll get into that next slide or two here. But I see risk as a good thing. I really do. And I still have 11 years out before I retire, and I'm not sure when I'll be accessing that money anyway. So again, everyone has different risk tolerances. And we get asked often what fund is the best one to invest in, and that's easy. Whichever one's going to give you the most money. But we're looking at the history of everything when it comes to the market. We don't know what it's going to be in the future. If you have some formula of knowing that, I would love to chat with you, because I'd love to know that information. I mean, who wouldn't? But we're looking from 2008 through closed market 2019. Of course, 2008, that's when the last market crash happened. And it was heavy. That C fund that I like so much, 37% loss. So if I had $100,000 January the 1st of 2008, I made no contributions that year. December 31st, I get my annual statement from TSP, and it says $37,000 loss on your $100,000 investment. What is our natural reaction to that?
Switch it.
Take it out, switch it, put it to the G fund. I mean, so often, and even, what happened in February of last year? COVID hit. February the 16th, 17th, 18th, it started going down. Phones start ringing. Mr. Brown, I'm fixing to move all my money from this fund to that fund. Why? Are you retiring right now? Do you need this money now? Well, no, but I'm losing all this money. I'm like, sir, ma'am, you're not losing anything. Look at your share count. Your share count's the same. In fact, when you go buy, you're buying more shares than what you normally buy. It's all about the shares. We're talking about the percentages. Money goes out of our account, it goes to TSP, but we're buying shares every month. Ever how many shares your contribution buys that month? That free money we get from the government is buying shares. Those shares are yours for life unless you do something with them. So when 08 happens, that's what this here is. We're looking at our 5 core funds. The G fund is this orange one, very steady. Again, there's no risk in the market. The L fund is one right above it, fairly steady as well. Then you have the green is our C fund. The blue is our S fund, and then the purple is our I fund. And then the black line's inflation. 08 happens, and a friend of mine that worked at 402, she was retiring in 08, and she had really enjoyed these nice growth years up to 2018. She did not prepare properly. As we are about 2 to 3 years out, depending on how conservative or how much tolerance you have, that's when we need to start looking at scaling back our risk. That's when we really need to be looking at it. She didn't do that. 08 happened, she retired December of that year. She moved everything from here down to the G fund because she lost 37% of her retirement account. The day she moved it from here down to here, this has been her growth pattern since then. True story. Versus letting the money stay there and allowing the market to rebalance and then maybe move your money once you got past the crash of 08. But on the flip side, had she just taken the advice 2 to 3 years out, that's when you need to start looking at maybe rebalancing or re-looking at your risk. Should have been making adjustments at all-time highs at that point. You could kick yourself in the tail for selling here, knowing it was going to do that, but we don't know that. And doing, again, at 2 to 3 years out, really look at your account. How do I want my risk to look in the event that an 08 happens. And it's probably going to happen again. I mean, sometime in our lifetime. We ain't that old yet. I mean, in all likelihood anyway, it's going to. What I would like to point out, again, I like the CMES fund. Those are the two funds I invest in personally. I do a 50-50 split. I mean, I have no secrets, no heartache whatsoever telling somebody where I invest at. You got to figure out what you want to do. But I will point out, look at the green and the blue, where they're at on this chart overall, and typically they're in the upper portion on this particular chart. Now, 2015 it did lose, but look at the difference between the top performer and the bottom performer. Now, if we were looking at these numbers, then I would think differently about pointing that out. But even when it is not on the top, it's not a major loss. And historically, if you look back at the U.S. market, U.S.-based companies rebound much quicker than overseas markets do. The 08 crash, 42.5% loss. It took 5 years for the iFund to recoup from the 08 loss. It took 24 months, roughly, for the CNES fund to recoup the loss of 08. And historically, and I've got another slide that kind of shows that. You'll see that throughout history of the U.S. They rebound much quicker. And here's the screen here. So we're basically looking at the history of the stock market through 2019. Of course, the Great Depression started. This is the first big crash back in the 29-30 time frame, right in there. What I want to point out, though, look at all the negatives. And look at the growth. Anytime you see a negative, there's typically followed by several years of pretty good growth. So the single highest year loss, following year, the single highest growth in the history of the stock market. This really points to time in the market, not timing the market. We get so many new airmen come in. They want to throw money in Bitcoin. They want to get rich quick. And you can get lucky. And I don't recommend Bitcoin or any kind of cryptocurrency, by the way, just FYI. None of that is regulated by the federal government. When I hear regulation of federal government, to me, those typically don't go hand in hand the way I personally would like. However, when it comes to my money, I want somebody regulating what companies are doing with my money. I don't want it just out there and the company could say, appreciate your investment. We'll see you later. We're filing bankruptcy, so I lose everything. That's why I like federal regulation when it comes to investing. But again, look at the negatives, but look at the positives, and it's time in the market. And this screen here is a great one. This looks at a $10,000 investment back in 1980 through close of the market 2018. $10,000 investment. There's roughly 10,000 days between 1 Jan of 80 through 2018. $10,000 invested in a S&P 500 index, so the C fund, if we're talking TSP, the account balance would be worth about $708,000 for a single $10,000 investment. 10,000 days, $708,000. Missing just the 5 best days out of the 10,000, account balance is down to $458. Just 5 days out of the 10,000. It's the 5 best, but just 5 days. You can see the best 10, best 30, best 50. This even more points to its time in the market that's important. Get a lot of folks, especially the new airmen, watching all kind of stuff, and I certainly encourage everyone to figure out different ways for your money to grow or for you to get wise on your money. But a lot of the stuff that gets pushed out to social media or what have you is get rich quick, do this and you're going to be wealthy overnight. It's possible, but what I'm telling you without a doubt is going to work for every person that invests. This method works. Also get questioned a lot about, well, should I have TSP as well as a Fidelity or whatever name, USAA, whatever name you want to put in front of it? Well, you could. The reason I would encourage TSP before any of the other companies is what we pay as an administrative fee. Last year we paid 49 cents for every $1,000 we had in TSP. The average 401k was $4.50 last year. Big difference. If you got a couple thousand in there, not a big deal. A couple 100,000, it's looking quite a bit different. A million or so, it's looking way different now. And by the way, there's 75,000, actually it's probably more than that now, 75,000 TSP millionaires, and that was, what, 3 or 4 months ago that number came out. So, and those are people like us. It's military, civilians that just contribute money, and their accounts, just FYI, are primarily made up of that CNES fund. That's primarily what their account is made up. And that's not why I like it. I like it because of that screen I showed you a while ago. I'll shop at Walmart and Home Depot and all those different ones. So here's why I don't like the iFund. So we're looking at, this is through close market 2019. TSP has not reproduced this for 2020, which ticks me off because I really like briefing from this. But prior to July of last year, there were only 10 funds. We had those 5 new Lifecycle funds added. So that's why we're only looking at 10 up here. The G Fund, original TSP fund, came out, in fact, today's its birthday. April the 1st of '87 is when G Fund actually started. When it first came out, it had some growth built into it. It was not structured the way it is today. Today, it's strictly built for security. And that's exactly what it's going to do, is it's going to provide security. It ain't going to build any wealth. I mean, inflation's, what, roughly 2% per year? So if you're only earning 2 1/4, then you're earning 1/4%, twice as good as a bank savings account, but you ain't going to build wealth from that. You'd have to live like 800 years old to do anything with that. So, following year, we had the F and C fund come out January 29th of '88. So we're looking at a 1 year, so 2019, then a 3-year, 5-year, 10-year average, then an average since inception. So when I'm looking at an investment, this is what I want to see this information right here. When did it start, and what has it returned since it started? I want to see that. The C fund I talked about, 10.66% return since '88. That's a pretty doggone good track record. You can build some wealth with 10% return. Then May the 1st of 2001, that's when that S and I fund came out. 5% return since '01. Not impressed with the I fund. And TSP is aware that the I fund is not doing what it's supposed to. They are supposedly in the process of restructuring. I was told that almost 2 years ago, and it hadn't changed yet. One company that we don't see in the I fund, or one country we don't see in the I fund, and might not ever see it, would be China, which happens to be either the first or second largest growing economy in the world next to us. That is not part of the I fund. It's extremely political reason it's not in there. But I've also had, and I don't know what your feelings are, but I've had people after this class come up and say, well, you know, I want to invest in the I fund now because there's child labor laws being violated, and I don't know all that because I don't get into that. I just talk about the funds, and because I mentioned China and one, they're like, well, I would definitely never invest if it's with China or whatever. But it's part of the market, though. I mean, when we're talking finances, China is huge. It's part of the market, so I think that discussion has to be made. I just don't know that we'll ever see it in TSP or not. Again, I'm not for or against it. I'm just pointing that out. Let's see here. All right, so the two most common tasks or things that we do in our TSP account is going to be a contribution allocation or an interfund transfer. Contribution allocation, fancy name for all the new money that hits my account. This is where I want it to go to. This is the fund or funds I want my money invested. That's all that means. Interfund, that means I'm selling one fund and I'm buying into another. This is the money that's already existing in your TSP account. When you decide, hey, I don't want to be in the G fund, I want to be in the I fund. That means you're going to sell the G fund, then you're going to buy ever how many shares with that account balance into whatever fund you want to invest in. That's called an interfund transfer. Those are the two most common. You can also update your beneficiary. You can potentially take a loan out against yourself. This is where you'll set up your actual withdrawals once you get to that point, is out on TSP's website. TSP.gov is the actual website. What else? Trying to get through and have some time for some questions. You can do 2 interfund transfers per month any way you want. Totally up to you. I probably do an interfund transfer once every 2 or 3 years. I'm just absolutely, I have a plan and I don't care, could care less what the market's doing. I have a 11-year plan and I don't care what the market's doing. My plan rarely changes. In fact, it just changed, again, first time in several years. I went from an 80-20 split, 80% C to 20% S to a 50-50. And the reason for that is the S fund just continues to move forward. It continues to do really well. And through COVID, look at our numbers. They're still ridiculous. I've been telling everybody that I brief, I look at our economy like a racehorse that's strapped down right now because of COVID. And we're still winning the race, so to speak. When everything gets settled, I don't know, my thought is it's going to continue to go up and go crazy. I don't know that, and I'm not a financial advisor, but that's the way I see it. TSP.gov, again, you can find all kind of resources out there. Their website does look a little bit different than this. They made some changes to it last year. I actually missed this site because I briefed on it from it so many years. But pretty much anything you want to know about TSP is going to be out there on their website. This is also where you go to log into your account. If you haven't been out there in a while, you're going to have to set up 2-factor authentication when you do go out there. Again, this stuff that we do all the time with both active duty and civilians. If you need help with this, we'd be glad to make an appointment and sit down with you and help you through this. So what questions are got? Because I can ramble on here for hours.
I can only get there if I'm over 50, right? I can't put extra money in over the set amount.
For this year, it's $19,500 is the most you can put in.
He's asking about catch-up contribution.
Oh, catch-up contributions. Yeah, that's if you do that, then you can put up to $26,000.
You have to be 50.
Yeah,
50 or over.
The year you
Yes.
turn 50.
Yeah.
The year I turn 50, I can start doing.
Yes. The year you turn 50. But then they have it. It's called spillover now. We used to, you actually had to do 2 different transactions. You did your normal $19,500, and then you got to add the additional $6,500. But now it's just called a pour over or drip system or something like that, where you can basically put $26,000 per year once you hit that age 50 mark, the year you turn age 50. Now, for you, if you just started, so when you say just started, how many years or months?
I got my first paycheck was 2 weeks ago.
Okay, so you're brand new. Okay,
So yeah, so it's like there's like a couple $100 in there.
Okay.
Going into an health fund.
So
Tomorrow
for-
there should be another couple $100.
So for you, you've got to wait 36 months before you get the full benefit of that 5% going into your account. It'd be vested. It takes 36 months for that to happen. But still a great retirement system. And kind of unique to TSP, more so than other typical investments, is, let's say I'm in the military or civil service, and I've worked here for 10 years, and Walmart or whatever says, hey, we got this great job opportunity. We want to give you more money for you to come to work for us. You have the option to roll TSP from TSP to some other company, or you can leave the money in TSP, which I recommend to all service members that are potentially getting out. When I retire Walmart or leave Walmart to go to work at Kmart, because they offer me more money than Walmart, then I could roll that Walmart money back into my TSP account. Normally, once you leave a company, you don't have that option, but you do with TSP. Again, where that's to our advantage as investors, the 49 cents per thousand, the low administrative fee is just huge. What other questions? I guess I need to be standing up here. Yes, sir.
So I'm about to retire from the military.
Okay.
How do I keep putting money in?
You got a civil service job lined up?
No.
Okay.
That's the only one?
Yeah, that is the only way. Once you come out of the uniform, you can no longer put money into it, unless you go back civil service, working for the government in some capacity. But again, just like I just talked about, you're going to have a whole nother career potentially after the military. I would never close out my TSP account. I would always keep the option to roll money back into it later on. That's the only way you can put money in it later on if you're not working for the federal government, is a rollover from one company to another. So if you retire, 20 years of service, you got money sitting in TSP, it's still your account. You can log into it. You can do interfund transfers.
Right.
You just can't do any allocation changes, or you have no money coming into it. But that's okay. I mean, you're going to go to work for a company likely that has some kind of retirement plan. Invest heavily in it by all means, especially if they have any kind of matching money. Max that thing out. Let's say you're with that company for a couple years and another company offers you more money, then roll that money into TSP and take advantage of the low administrative fees. That would be my strategy.
So that's after you retire, that's the only time you can put money into the TSP is when you're transferring jobs?
That's the only time you can roll one
Qualified retirement account.
Thank you, Jody. One qualified retirement account, or a qualified retirement account in a TSP.
So if I have a TSP before I retire, I can't just stick any money into it at all?
No, you can't put any money in it. It's basically, it's actually one account. And did you deploy any your last year of service? Okay, so what I would do is just, there's a form you'd fill out. You might be able to do it online now. I would just combine my military TSP with civil service. That's what I did with mine. There's really no advantage to have two different pots of money like that. You're not going to be able to draw off one and not the other, and one's not going to make more money. It's all one bucket. This one's under the military and one's under civil service. But I recommend that.
I didn't have the military one. I was just.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Like if I did have a military, like civil service, like say 3 years from now, 4 years from now, I change jobs, but I'm vested now in the TSP. And a good example is like I used to work at M1. If I went back, say, to work for M1, like they have a 401 that I can do there.
Yeah.
But if I choose not to do that, can I still put money from my M1 pay and put it into my TSP?
Yeah. No, that closes when we come out of the uniform. Yeah.
Transfer is the only way to get the money into it after you
Yeah.
retire or left service.
Yeah.
What you were saying about when you turn 50, you can put money in it, you have to be civil service as well to do that.
I'm sorry.
You were saying something about when you turn 50, you can,
Oh, once you hit 50, you can put more in.
but you have to have.
Well, yeah, you still have to be able to do an actual contribution, and that's where it would be civil service primarily. Once you hit 50, you have that catch-up option within TSP, as well as in the civilian sector as well. And the neat thing, if you're maxing out TSP, you can still do a Roth IRA outside the gate, another $6,500. So you can have a Roth TSP inside the gate and a Roth IRA on the outside of the gate. And you can put up to $26,000 into a Roth account if you're over 50 and still have the $6,500 outside the gate. That's extremely unique to TSP. Yes, sir.
So a couple questions. The first one, you maybe addressed in your presentation, and maybe I just missed it, but you mentioned not doing the L fund. Is that strictly because the C and the S funds are better? Is that why?
It's a personal thing. It's just a strategy that I don't like the I fund.
No, not the I, the L.
Well,
You say you don't do the L, you would advise.
because of the I fund. So,
Not the I, I'm not talking about the I, I'm strictly talking the L fund. You say you don't do the L.
which has the I fund in it.
I fund.
See, here's the reason I don't like it. The I fund is part of the L fund. See, all of these are made up of those 5 core funds. I think I can do better with my almost 8% not in the I fund. I think I can do better myself by not investing in the life cycle funds.
By using the C and the S?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
That's what I assumed you were saying.
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure.
Yes, sir. Yeah, see, all these have the iFund in it.
Right.
And I just don't care for the iFund. I think there's a better way of making money.
And to your point, Mike, I wouldn't dislike the Lifecycle fund so much if they reversed their proportion of what was in the S fund and the I fund.
Yeah,
If it was-
absolutely.
If they did the S fund at the
Yeah.
same percentage that they're doing the I fund, and the I fund at the lower percentage, then I wouldn't have so much heart.
Yeah, I would be more on board with it.
Yeah,
And I'm
absolutely.
I hope they adjust it. I'll be honest with you, because I like this concept when I get close to retirement. Granted, I can do this on my own, just investing in the individual funds, but this is set it and forget it. You know, if you're like, he lost me way back at the beginning, I don't care about all this, I just want to know my money's doing something for me. This is a good place. This is where everybody starts now versus that G fund. So this is a good thing. I just personally don't care for it. It's just a personal thing.
I go to the next one, see the 60 and 65 and 55. Look at that, you've got 35 cents of every dollar is going into the I fund, but only 16 cents is going into the S fund. And that just, to me, that just needs to be reversed. And that's what these young airmen are going into. And you look at the returns, the historical returns on the S fund as opposed to the I fund.
Yeah. It doesn't make sense if you look at the numbers. I mean, why would they put so much more in a higher risk that has almost half the return? If we go back to this screen here, almost half the return. I mean, it's a little bit better than half, but essentially half of what the S fund has done.
You look at the 10-year average.
Yeah, I mean, look at the 10-year average, it's more than
10-year
that.
average is 13%, and it's less than 6 for
Yeah.
the.
Well, I guess my question was looking at the same chart though. The L fund is a 7 1/4, the 2040, just on this particular slide.
Yes, sir.
So I mean, even though it has part of the I fund in it, it's still a
Absolutely.
moderate investment compared
Absolutely.
to.
Yeah, I'm not saying that it's not a good one at all. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying.
I just want to understand
Okay.
why you're saying. I'm with you now.
Yeah,
I understand.
okay.
This was just.
Yeah.
I didn't catch that as you were going through. Now, my second question is, and I know there's a million different answers to this, but generically, when it comes time to start taking funds out,
Yes, sir.
kind of what's the best way to kind of go about that? Because my understanding, this is pre-tax money you're putting into this, but then when you start pulling out, you're going to have to presumably pay taxes on that. So how's the best way to kind of go about that at whatever point in the future? And I know, again, everybody's going to be completely different, but what's a general way of looking at that?
Well, a couple of things. First off, are we talking traditional or are we talking Roth money? If we're talking traditional, yes, it will be taxed when you pull it out.
Traditional, I'm talking
Yeah.
traditional for
Okay.
myself, but.
Okay, so a couple different strategies. I kind of like the 4% rule, and Jody, you can jump in at any time. But I also like that if I retire at age 62, I could start Social Security if I so chose to, which I don't personally think is a good idea, but I could. Or I could wait until 67, which is full retirement age. So if I know I have Roth money, and I have both in my account, I was heavily traditional for years, but I do strictly Roth now. But my plan is when I first retire, I'm going to be using traditional money because my taxes are going to be lower. Social Security is a taxable event that's going to happen for all of us. So therefore, I'm going to use traditional because my taxes are going to be lower. Once Social Security kicks in, then I'm going to start using more of my Roth money that's not going to be taxed. So that's just kind of my strategy. The 4% thing, if I'm able to withdraw 4% of my TSP investment, and I'm still earning in the L income over 4%, then I'll never hit my principal. I'm making what I'm drawing out, basically. That's a strategy, and there are literally millions of different possibilities looking at different strategies. The 4%, I like it. It's easy to understand, but it really depends on other factors like how healthy am I? Do I plan to leave any money for my family as a legacy, or do I want to enjoy life and spend it all before I'm out the building? I mean, there's lots of different things that go into there, but a simplified answer is, I'm gonna be using or traditional money early before I start Social Security. And I hope the 4% rule, is effective for me. That's what I'm kind of.
But in order to net 4%, I mean, coming out the traditional side, you're gonna have to take out more than that because the taxes will be on that, right?
It will be taxed as it comes out, absolutely.
So if you only take out 4%, you're only gonna get that minus the tax rate,
Right.
correct?
Yes, sir.
So,
And ideally, we're not gonna just go in and pull large sums out. We're gonna figure out, hey, I need an additional X amount of dollars per month to maintain my lifestyle, once I retire. And that's hopefully it's within that 4%. That's my theory. That's what I plan to do anyway. It's just take a monthly withdrawal from this. It'll be just another check that comes into my checking account.
so if I understand what you're saying, it kind of goes back to your stool analogy. I would look at the three aspects of what I anticipate getting with my retirement,
Yes, sir.
separate retirement, and then Social Security, and then the 4% of this, and saying, can I make it on that?
Yes, sir.
And then,
That is a strategy, absolutely.
I mean, that's just a generic way of
Yes,
looking
sir.
at it. Okay.
Yes, sir.
What age will you be when you retire?
Well, that's a real good question.
mean,
I
do
think
you-
full retirement is 69 for me, I believe, because of the year I was born. Maybe it's 67. I thought it was 69. Anyway, regardless, I don't know. I'll hit 30 years of service next year. I'm strictly being no military service.
You'll hit 30 years?
Next June, yes.
So you're
But I'm looking at least another
minimum
10 to
retirement
15 years,
age.
because I'm only 52.
Your minimum retirement age is 50, probably 56.
I think 57 with 20 last I knew, but yeah.
Depends on year.
But I plan to work till, at least in my 60s, another 10, 15 years probably.
Yeah.
So,
Well, kind of a strategy then that you would want to think about was, say you retire at 62,
okay,
at age 62.
another 10 years.
So now you have the option, do I want to take Social Security at early Social Security at age 62, or do I want to wait for my full retirement age, 60?
Should be 67, is what it should be.
For every year you postpone taking Social Security past age 62 to full retirement age, you're gaining about 6% in benefit. Because you take about a 30% hit from 67 to
Right.
62. So at 62, when you retire from FERS, you say, well, if I take money out of my TSP to enable me to postpone until full retirement age on my Social Security, then you're earning, in essence, you're earning a 6% return right there, because your Social Security benefit is going up 6% every year.
But I'm losing it off of my TSP balance.
Well, you're losing some,
That's
yeah.
trying to draw it out.
I mean, if you're
6 years
still
earlier than-
if you're still earning a 6-7% return, and you're only taking maybe you're not taking out that full amount.
Yep.
Yours isn't going up as fast, obviously, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you just kind of have to crunch the numbers.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's the nice thing about it is now, after changes TSP's recently made, we can go in and adjust this anytime we want. And whenever we start taking withdrawals, usually you had to be within an open season or open window to make some adjustments. I mean, it is really convenient now. It's like most any commercial product now. Used to, a lot of people would retire and they would pull their whole amount out and go to a retirement account because they'd have easier access to it. But TSP has fixed that problem because so many people were doing it. So it's real flexible for us now.
But then you would also advise leaving the money in the TSP and getting like an annuity payment situation as opposed to withdrawing a lump sum.
Well, and this is personal, I don't like annuities. I don't foresee ever doing an annuity.
Well, that's what you're talking about. If you're talking about getting 4% every month, I mean, it's still an
Well,
annuity.
yeah, that's one way of looking at it, except for if you get an annuity through MetLife, which TSP uses, and the account balance is no longer yours at that point. But I guess you could look at it as almost like that. If that's what you're only pulling the 4% out, I guess you could look at it kind of like an annuity.
But it's a personally driven
Yeah.
annuity.
Right,
Yeah.
that's still an annuity.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying is, you were
Okay.
saying, you would advise doing that as opposed to taking the lump sum. from your
Yes.
TSP,
Oh, absolutely.
Because you're
Yes,
still
sir.
drawing money on it.
You're still making a little bit.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
That would be quite a taxable event, too.
Right,
Yeah.
that was
Yeah.
kind of behind the question there.
Yeah.
So you're still gonna get taxed as you withdraw the annuity, whatever form that takes.
Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's probably if we're sitting down with a certified financial planner.
Right.
And paying that fee-only certified financial planner, paying them an hourly wage to give me some advice, and then saying, thank you very much, and
Yeah.
go out and implement the plan on your own. But they would consider all those different tax events,
And they
tax
have
consequences.
Yeah, and they
of what
have
you-
calculators that we don't have access to. That software is insanely expensive, but that's where it would be that's what I would look at doing, is I would sit down with someone, pay them a fee for their service at point of service, not, hey, I want to invest with you, because then they're kind of dragging you along for the ride as they feed you information. I'd rather just say, here's your hourly fee, here's what I'm looking at doing, is this gonna work or not? What would you recommend?
And then the vehicle to do what you're talking about with the 4% or whatever number.
Yes, sir.
Is that driven through a form on the website that?
Yeah, I mean, you decide what dollar amount that you need from your account. I just use 4%.
Right, whatever number.
Yeah.
But
you
that
just
is a form on the website? that you would
Absolutely,
do?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah. It's kind of on the left towards the bottom.
Withdrawal form or
Withdrawal,
something?
yep. That's what it says, and I don't think, I don't know if we have any of those slides. Yep, there's none on here. I have some slides that actually show that, but it's a whole different presentation. But it's when you log in your TSP account, left-hand side, kind of towards the bottom. That's where that'd be at.
Back to his catch-up question.
Yes, sir.
So you want to time that, right, to where in order to kind of maximize everything, you want it
Absolutely.
toward the end of the year to be your final.
Absolutely.
amount.
The second pay period of December is when we want to reach our max any year, whether you're doing catch-up or not. Because as soon as we hit our 19.5, the matching money stops. We still get I believe we get the 1% still, but the matching is over and done with at that point. So if you hit it in October, then you've lost
So the
2 years of
matching money contributes to that.
No, the matching money does not contribute to your 19.5, that's separate. You yourself can put up to 19,500, but as soon as you hit it,
So
then the matching stops.
So like as soon as I hit the 19, say it was like October and I hit 19.5, shouldn't what money I be putting in stop? And then even though, does that automatically make the matching money stop? Is that the reason why? Or
I don't
should-
know.
Because I'm doing 5%.
Yeah.
I'm doing 5%. Come this time, October, I hit my 19.5.
Yeah, yours is gonna stop.
My
I don't know.
5% is gonna stop. Shouldn't they still be putting 5% in?
No, because it's based off what you put in, yes.
Yeah, okay, that's all.
Yeah, that event's gonna trigger.
Like the 1% is automatic, so that'll
The
still.
1% will likely continue on because that is part of your retirement package.
Okay.
But the matching is gonna stop at that point.
My money and the matching will stop.
Yep.
Okay.
So you don't want that to happen until at least the first pay period of December, but it's easy if you're doing the 26,000 because we have 26 pay periods a year. So it's really easy if your goal is to do the 26,000 per year, it's $1,000 per paycheck. Because we have 26 pay periods. Oh, I hear you.
It's like,
I'm not there
I won't
either.
ever reach that point, but that's what I was just curious about, because like if I had set it to be 5% for me, just because I'm not allowed to put 5% in outcome, there's still, but I understand I'm not putting 5% in, so there's no reason to be matched for it.
Yeah. And we've had several civilians that, they're 5 years out and they're doing the $1,000 a month. It's great to show them how to do that. I wish I was doing it.
Would it be stupid to, like, because I have the L fund, one of the L funds, would it be stupid to keep an L fund say, more money into like the CMS funds?
Well, I mean,
But less into the L fund versus?
you could, well, here's my plan. Once I get to that point, I'll just bring up, any of these really. Once I get to the point where I'm like, all right, it's time for me to scale back, what I'm likely going to do is I will do an interfund transfer. The pot that is there, I'm going to secure it to some extent. It'll be a combination of the G and the L fund. I don't know that it'll look like any of these necessarily, but next payday, my money's going right back to the C and the S fund. But at that point, I've done an interfund with the money that's there, and I've secured it. All the new money, which ain't nothing like the pot of money, it's going to have risk associated with it. The market crashes, darn, I lost that money, but not the pot, not the golden egg. That's what I'm going to do. Is I'll move the pot of money, I'll secure it, but even once I retire, I mean, I could see continue with the C and the S fund just because I look at this stuff all the time and I'm okay with it, but not the pot. The pot of money is going to be secured. You know, I'm going to secure it. And then once I in retirement, I would probably leave a portion still in that CDS fund, just because I look at this stuff and I see what it does over time. See, some people can't sleep with that thought, but see, I'm just the opposite. I can't sleep with knowing my money's sitting in a G fund and not working for me. So I have an opposite of what some people do. It's just a different perspective.
I've seen some that have used a strategy, kind of like what you're talking about with, what Mike mentioned earlier. You know, say they have their money in the 2040 fund, but they want a little more risk. So they put 75% of their contribution going into that 2040 fund. The other 25% of their contribution, maybe they split it 15% going directly into the C fund and 10% into the S fund. So that beefs up those two areas of your pie chart.
See, that's kind of what I was thinking of. Like my number would have been way more different because I was thinking of like a smaller percentage into the L fund and then doing a bigger risk with a
I've seen people
like,
use
anywhere from like 75 to 80% going of what I would in just to see in S funds, and then like 20 to 25% just going into the L fund just to kind of have it.
Kind of have that balance, having the balance over there.
I mean, there's almost
I've seen people use that strategy.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I mean, it's like an infinite possibility. It's just about, I mean, that's a strategy.
If you transfer funds, like, so if I decide to keep all my stuff in the L fund, so if I transfer from like L 2040 to say like L 2050, if you were talking about like it's based on like not necessarily the money but the number of stocks. So whatever stocks I had in that pretty much goes to zero, and then I rebuy into this new one.
Yes, sir. You're selling one and then buying into another at whatever the close of market is that day. So any transactions we make, if we do them before noon or 11 o'clock our time, it's noon Eastern Standard Time, then it goes into effect that day. But if it's afternoon, then it's the following business day. And I always tell people I wouldn't do this Friday afternoon because then we got to wait till Monday to close out before it goes into effect. But yeah, when you do that interfund, you're saying, okay, I want to sell the L2050 and I want to buy into the L2060. So you're selling one day and buying that same day, whatever the market value is.
But that's pretty self-explanatory when you're going in there, because like, I've only looked at it like once shortly after I set it up. So like if I wanted to do contribution allocation, it's very obvious what I'm going to click on.
Yes, it's on the left-hand side, about the middle of the page. You're going to see contribution allocation or interfund transfer. You click on that link, and it's going to bring you up, and it's going to say request interfund transfer. And you click that, and it basically opens a box with all 15 funds. You're going to have 100% invested in that L20, 50, 60, whatever your fund currently is. And then you're going to have a box down the right-hand side. You can put whatever percent you want in any of those boxes, as long as it equals 100 in the end. You could do 20, 20, 20, 5, 5, 5, 5, whatever combination you want. It's real easy. Once y'all see it once, you'll be set for your career in all likelihood. As soon as you see it once more, oh yeah, I remember that now. It's real easy to get around once you get out there. Yes, sir.
For the TSP, you can take the money out at 65, no penalty?
59 and a half or older, you can start taking withdrawals without being penalized. And the penalty, we're talking just the 10% early withdrawal penalty. So if it's traditional, you still have a tax obligation. But if it's Roth, then there's no more tax obligation after 59 and a half.
Traditional, and you cannot go from traditional to the other.
To Roth, no, there's no conversion in TSP. Now that is one reason, Jody, you might be able to help me, that some people, that's why they would take money, used to, is they would take it out of a traditional and they would move that into a Roth account, correct?
Well, you could transfer it into a traditional IRA and then convert it.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say.
Traditional IRA to a Roth IRA.
To a Roth, yeah. There's no conversion in TSP.
No. Now, the reason most people moved their money out of TSP prior to a year ago, September, was the fact that you just couldn't get to your money.
Yeah.
You know, just like what you're wanting to do. You say, well, how much money do I need? Well, you come up with I need $500 a month out of my account. You had one time a year that you could say how much you wanted them to send you monthly. And they would send you a letter in November saying, you're currently getting $500 a month from your account. Would you like to continue getting $500 a month, or do you want to change that amount? And if you said the same, then they sent you $500 a month for the next year. Or you could say, no, send me $1,000 a month. But you didn't have any flexibility. Now you can. You know, if you want $1,000 a month out, you tell them $1,000 a month. 3 or 4 months down the road, you say, you know what, that's too much money. I think I'll let that stay in there and work for me. Maybe I only want $700 a month. Then you have the ability to change it ad hoc, on an ad hoc basis. But that's why most people were moving it out there. They're going, wait a minute, this is my money. I ought to be able to tell TSP, here's how much money I want. Send it to me. And they weren't getting that flexibility, so people were moving it into IRAs and other areas to have that flexibility.
Is there a better way to minimize the tax impact? For myself, traditional.
Yeah.
How's a better way to minimize the tax impact of those funds?
Yeah, again, looking at kind of from the Social Security standpoint, postponing that is one strategy, because that allows you to be in a lower tax bracket when you're taking traditional money out. Because once, like Mike said, once you start getting that Social Security, you know, most likely 85% of that's going to be taxable income. So it's going to, you know, raise your tax rates up, or possibility of raising your tax rates up. But again, no, I mean, it's traditional money. You're going to have to pay the tax on it. So
now you do have a little bit of flexibility where you get to decide, do I want taxes to come out monthly, or do I want to do it at one time at the end of the year? You do have that option when you go in there and set up your withdrawals.
I'm facing the same thing. All my money's in traditional. They didn't come out with the Roth until just before I retired, and you know, I just left out all my contributions going into the traditional instead of switching over. Same thing, you know.
So would it be advantageous for myself, or at this point, to start contributing toward the Roth as opposed to the traditional for that reason?
Here's me. I did traditional for years, even though Roth was an option. And it's been several years ago now, I have come to realize, or even though I see it and I talk about it, my taxes are we're probably not going to get something from the federal government and say, hey, we're lowering your taxes. I mean, of course, politicians say that all the time, but my taxes ain't going down. So I've probably got about 75% in traditional, but everything I do now is Roth. Now I pay a ridiculous amount in taxes every payday. But I'm willing to do that now.
To avoid having to do that later.
Absolutely. So I've got both in there. And here's the thing, and one thing that a lot of people get wrapped around the axle on, your TSP account is one bucket. it's got two different or right now maybe one type of money, but when you start Roth, it's both coming into the same account. They both go out differently. But they're still making the same amount, because I get people that say, well, I've been putting money in traditional for years. I got $200,000 in there. If I start a Roth, and they'll start all over from the beginning. No, it's one bucket of money. Just two funnels coming in and two going out. But it's one account. If you earn 20% on your TSP account, it's on all of it, on the overall. So it's not some on traditional and some on Roth. Sometimes people don't understand that. It's one account.
It would be good for me to change my interest like Roth.
Well, I mean,
Like since I'm early on and
well,
don't pay taxes on it
and not to
now.
mention, you're probably at the lowest rank you'll be your civilian career. And that's what I tell all the new airmen. You're at the lowest rank you'll ever be coming into the Air Force. A Roth just makes sense. Now there are, and you can probably find as many people as you want to say just the opposite, that traditional is a better way of going. But someone that's properly planning throughout our career, if we are saving, investing, not running up credit card debt, not having all this stuff, when we hit retirement, we're going to be struggling on how am I going to best not give all my money to the federal government through taxes and other stuff like that.
So with the traditional and Roth, I don't understand anything about investing whatsoever. So when I look at it, is the Roth going to look just like this? Like,
Oh,
I
they're
have a
identical.
health fund
Yes.
And all that kind of
Well,
stuff?
yes. Yeah. There's no splitting the different types of money.
So
Just
the
traditional.
amount of money that can go into traditional is the same amount of money. that
Yeah,
goes
Yes,
no,
I did
that's
it.
just the tax treatment
I
of the
can
money.
still set it up to be like an L or whatever.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, there's no change.
Yeah.
Well, then again, I'm sorry, go ahead.
The only difference is one I pay taxes on now, the other one I pay
Yes,
taxes
sir.
on.
So traditional is tax deferred, and then Roth you pay taxes now, but no taxes at the end.
So all the growth you get
Is on mine.
in the Roth.
In the Roth is all yours.
Once it becomes a qualified account after 5 years, it takes 5 years for it to become what's considered a fully qualified Roth account.
Mhm.
But after that, then everything would come out to you tax-free.
Okay.
Prior to the 5-year point, some of it's going to probably be still taxable because it has to become qualified. And that's kind of getting way down into the weeds and not necessary to talk about.
But then over a long period of time, if you use the traditional side, that's gonna be that much more money to grow with your interest rates, right?
It's
As
all the
opposed-
same. It's all the same bucket though.
Right, but this is going in pre-tax.
Yes,
So
sir.
it's that much more money getting that return on investment versus the Roth. You're paying the taxes before that interest rate is applied. So you would just have to do the number crunch to see which way is better, right? It would depend on the length of your investment
It would.
as to which way would be better. So I guess that's kind of where I'm 30
Well,
years in, I've got 10 years left. Is it worth going to paying taxes now versus what's my return gonna be on, you know what I'm saying?
I do.
I mean, that would be
I'm trying to think of how I want to.
intriguing, mathematical problem.
Well, I mean, I don't know. For me, I like the thought that I have the option to either use the Roth money or the traditional. And my strategy is I'm going to use that traditional before I ever start taking Social Security. So that's my strategy.
Right, what I'm saying is if I put 1,000 in traditional,
Yes, sir.
I'm putting 1,000 in.
Yeah.
Versus Roth, I'm putting 800 in because tax,
No.
whatever the dollar amount.
No, the dollar amount going into your actual account is going to be the same percentage, whatever your percent is. It's just your taxable income in that year is going to, if it's traditional, your taxable income is going to be lowered by the amount that's going in there. You're going to pay full taxes on the amount in the Roth. But your dollar amount actually going into the account for investment is going to be the same.
Yeah, whatever dollar amount you're putting in there, that
Yeah, you're paying taxes
you're
separate.
It's being
than
taxed
the
before it ever
actual
comes out.
contribution.
You're gonna have to be able to afford that now versus.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So if you're
Yes.
having to look at that impact, I'm
Yeah.
putting in 800 now
That-
to equivocate, so
I'm
$200.
tracking
Yes.
with you now.
Yeah.
I'm tracking.
So now that extra $200 is growing over 30 years, whatever, versus, and that's per period. Yeah, if I put in $1,000, I get that, but now I'm $200 less that I
Yes.
have. I understand what you're saying,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
going the other
Yeah.
way, that's
I don't know
what I
about-
don't know the answer to.
I just look at the fact that on the Roth side, all of that money's growing tax-free for me. Whereas if I'm putting it in the traditional, yeah, maybe I have a larger amount in essence going into that contribution. But I'm gonna ultimately have to pay tax on not only what I put in, but all the growth that money
Yeah.
made for me as well. So I don't, me personally, I think the Roth, even if I have to pay, absorb the fact that I'm paying tax on that contribution now, in the long run works for me better.
Yeah.
If you can afford to do that, because
If
you gotta
you
pay
could-
the
yeah,
taxes.
absolutely, yeah,
now.
you'd have to look at that, but I just, yeah, I like the fact that it's not only growing tax-free for me, but that's just.
This is the last question, I'll be done probably here, but, so, the 26,000, is that the max between the traditional and the Roth?
Yes, well, if you're over 50,
Right,
then
I'm over
yes,
50.
yeah, a combination or one or the other. One or the other or a combination total.
Okay,
And the nice thing about it, the additional 6,500 actually gets, matching contributions to it where before it did
Yeah,
not.
that's right.
So that's kind of a
They
new
just
change
changed
this
it.
year.
oh, really?
Yeah, they just changed that.
Yeah, that's kind of sweet, that's a sweet, pretty sweet deal.
That's on top of the 5% match of the first 5.
You get a total of 5 on the entire amount, where before it was only the 19.5. They didn't match on the catch-up contributions. Now they match on the catch-up contributions.
They don't match 6,500, they match 5% on the 6,500.
Correct.
Okay,
Yep.
gotcha.
Where before they would cut it off at the, the 19.5, the regular contributions. So they just started that, which I thought was a nice addition.
Well, you take my percentage of the I fund, put on the S.
You
Should
can. You can. That's an option you got.
Should I though?
What's that?
Should I?
Oh, I don't know.
Counselor.
But I'm not a counselor. I'm a counselor, not an advisor.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Your advice would be yes, though, most likely.
I would look at the returns and the historical returns and
I'll just say I wouldn't have it in the
make
I
an
fund.
informed decision, but.
You wouldn't have anything in the I fund?
No, I would not. That's why I don't invest in the life cycle funds, in
Really?
any of the L funds. But again, that's a personal thing for me. I do a 50-50 split, half C, half S. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of
50
that.
C, 50 S.
That's what I do. Well, we appreciate your time. I mean, we really do. I don't know how many were online. I didn't even
Appreciate your
look.
time.
If y'all have any questions, want to sit down and go more in depth, and we meet for one of the benefits y'all have for.
Y'all are doing face-to-face now still?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, we're fully staffed, fully open. We normally have something in front of us, or if we're in our office, and we'll both be masked up, but absolutely. Absolutely. Let us know if we can help.
You guys counsel on other things that are TSP related, like
Anything money.
investment,
Thank y'all.
Yep.
budgets and all that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Do
Can I
that.
Make an appointment for that?
Yes, sir. You can either make one with Jody or myself.
Whoever's available next week?
I can. Give me just a couple minutes. Let me get logged out of here.